to Costa Rica. Let go of who you are and what you have. Take off your clothes, remove the layers, remove the mask. Open your heart, open your soul. Enter the hole, let go what you think you need and are. It's not yours, it's not mine, it's not me, it's not you. We are more than that. Coconut water, Lululemon, veganism, stretching, ooh. We don't need it, It's not what you are. Doing yoga, getting naked, asana, ooh. Finding stability within the confusion. Naked fearlessness. Woo. Are you? It's not you, it's not you. Cambodia is my heart. Japan is my brain. Stop stretching, go to Blue Ocean. Let go. Boulders can break my bones, but they can't break my breath. Get naked with yogis. Getting naked with Yogi Aaron under a tree on a blanket. Jump in the lake, freeze your woo. Are you? It's not me, it's not you. This is us melting into us. You've said that yoga is about stripping away layers. What are some of these layers that yoga is stripping away or removing?
A lot of people, even in the, new age self-help world, will think of, that we have layers. We have layers of protection. We have layers of mistrust. We have, layers of whatever. I mean, people conjure their own images of what layers is. From a yogic perspective, it really pertains to ego, our sense of self. And there's so much that we invest inherently into our image. And again, that kind of almost sounds a little bit cliche. Everybody's like, oh, you've got to let go of your ego. And it's such an easy thing to say, and it's such a cliche thing to say. But what does it actually mean, and how do we actually put it into practice? So when we talk about those layers, what I'm referring to mostly is those layers of the identity of self that we cling to. And like, I could give you a few examples of that. I own a yoga retreat, as you know, in Costa Rica, Blue Ocean Yoga Retreat and Spa. And we mainly cater to, obviously, yoga people and yoga teachers with yoga groups. Yoga teachers bring yoga groups to us. And so I've seen everything now. Of course, now that I've said that, the universe is going to throw me another curveball. But I feel like I've seen everything. And so there was this one yoga teacher that came to Blue Osa, and they, this was pretty much when we first started. I think it was like December of 2011. It might have been 2012. I don't quite recall. But it was from this very fancy yoga studio neighborhood in New York City. I actually believe, and I'm not 100% certain, that the yoga studio is no longer, it's closed its doors. It was a big, big, big studio. But that yoga teacher came up to me the day before, he arrived the day before, and he said, Aaron, everybody in New York is drinking coconut water who practices yoga. It's a thing. So we need to have coconut water because we're yogis. So there's a layer, and it's like there's identification. And so the thing that I'm identified to is being a yogi, and a yoga person is someone who drinks coconut water. which for the record is not a thing. Just for any of your listeners listening, it's not a thing. But that was his level of identification. And we couldn't provide coconut water to him. And because we couldn't provide it, there was like a deep level of suffering going on, not just with him, but everybody in their group, because they were yogis who drank coconut water. And so that's like a layer. I mean, it's such a superficial layer. It's kind of a silly demonstration, but we all do this. One of the biggest areas that I see at Blue Osa is people's attachments to food. There's a certain amount of food they should be eating. They should be eating more vegetables. Some are like no vegetables and only meat. Some are like no meat and vegetables, just fruit. Why are you not serving raw foods? Because I'm a yogi, so I eat raw foods. I've even had people come and say, I'm a yogi and we eat meat, you know. So there's all of these different layers, and we all hold on to them. And yoga is about breaking through them and understanding them. And part of the way to understand them, and there's a few kind of like tricks if you're open to it, not like you as in Michael, you, but just people in general. But there's a few ways to look at it. And one of them is understanding, what am I attached to? And so a lot of people are attached to having a new iPhone as soon as it comes out. And so yoga would say having the new iPhone isn't bad or good. That's not the point. The point is your identification with needing to have it. What part of you is in need of having it? Because that part of you that needs to have it is a part of you that's not being fulfilled, and it's a misidentification with your true self. So yoga would come in and say, well, maybe skip the next upgrade and sit with that feeling of discomfort and use that as an opportunity to understand what layer of yourself needs. I would, my first thought was like, what needs to be penetrated, but it's not penetrated. What layer of yourself needs to be dissolved? Because what we're ultimately looking at doing is not penetrating the layers, but actually dissolving them. And so that's one area. And then another area is like, what are the things that you're avoiding? That's a very good indication of understanding yourself. And then there's a few other things. But all of this is to kind of understand, what is the mask that I'm holding? And so the Greek root word for mask is actually persona, personality. And in the Greek plays, you would hold up these personas, these masks in front of you when you were in a play. And when you were in that play, you would hold up this mask to kind of show what character you're supposed to be inhabiting or playing. And the truth is that we're all holding up masks. And for most of us, those masks are so far away from radiating anything that represents who we really are. And we've forgotten who we really are because we're more attached to the mask than the journey of understanding who we really are. And so yoga is that process of kind of dissolving those masks and understanding why we're holding them up. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, enough. But why do we hold them up? Because it seems to be sort of the standard thing. If we hold on to things, we try to build this brand and build this image and hold on to this identity and these habits and beliefs, and we're just kind of like holding on to everything and kind of protecting something. What is it? What is it we're doing? Why do we do this? Because there are benefits. There are benefits to it.
I I'm going to come right back to what I just said. We're doing the things that we do in life is to protect our sense of self and protect this image that we're projecting. And the yogic explanation is just simple. We've just forgotten our true nature. It's so easy to forget our true nature because we get caught up in, kind of use a poetic phrase, the karmic wheel of life. We see countless sort of stories and mythologies, and Hollywood is great at kind of producing these kinds of movies where you see people that start from nothing, they're poor, they don't have a lot of money, but what they really value is their friendships and their laughter. And then what does the storyline usually take? They discover money and success, and they start to change. And now they have a whole new ego that they're sort of melding into, and they've completely forgot who they really are. And of course, then the stories in Hollywood fashion is to get back to that sense of who we really are or who they really were. But all of what we do is invested into this ego, this persona, and so we go out of our way to do it. We just had a group leader this last week come, and it was a very challenging group for the team. And it was just fascinating for us to sit back and kind of watch, group after group comes to Blue Osa. They have a great time. They love everything that we offer. And with this particular group, the group leader sort of has her own sort of like, it has to be this way. And if it isn't like this, then, everything is wrong. And so that's like a sense of ego, like having such a deep sense of this self that you're completely all in for, and you're going to fight tooth and nail for it. You can look at, I don't want to get political, and my comments aren't necessarily political, but you can look at like in America right now, and sometimes people refer to it as tribal politics. And that is like yoga 101. It's like yoga philosophy. People get stuck into a team, and anything else, like anything that kind of wavers, like if somebody goes, well, oh, I want to listen to the other team and see what they've got to say, it's all of a sudden, you're not with us anymore. You're not part of the group think, the group identity. And so much of right now you see in sort of the political sphere, especially in the US and a lot in Europe. And I see this a lot on social media because I end up blocking these people constantly. Like, I don't want to hear it, or snoozing them. Facebook has that great feature, snoozing. But it's kind of like you're all in and you've got to reaffirm to the world, this is who I am and this is what I believe. And yoga is saying, step away from all of that. So that part of yourself becomes quiet and you can start to turn your attention inward to understand a little bit more about who you are inside without all of that outside noise.
Yeah, and if I think about like my happiest, I don't know if happy is the right word, but when I feel most alive, it's when that self and everything I am kind of just melts away, and I re-enter this connection with everything and with people, and I'm not holding on and protecting whatever my resources or even my body. It's like you're less scared, and you're just kind of like, let's just trust and connect and share. I recently got back from Cambodia, and there was this point there where for 5 or 6 days where I found this village, and there I really like let go. I mean, one, people were wearing less clothes. I think there's no coincidence there, but they were not using their phones, so I wasn't using my phone. We couldn't even speak the same language, so we couldn't even hold on to words. We just had to be there with each other. Eye contact, there was a lot of eye contact, a lot of playing, a lot of music. They weren't wearing shoes, so there's a connection with the earth. I normally am a bit of a I'm not a cheap ass, but I'm not like I don't share enough. And for some reason there, I was sharing. And I don't know, it was this feeling of like I'm not who I thought I was. I also stopped doing the podcast for about a month. So this whole identity of I'm a podcaster was kind of going away. And I was like, no, no, no. But I felt better in a way. Even listening to podcasts, I had lost my earbuds earlier on in the trip, and even being someone who's like, I don't know, I'm smart, or I'm someone who listens to podcasts, that went away. A lot of things were gone. I mean, my language was gone in a way. I'm just there looking in their eyes, smiling and playing and eating together. And
yeah, it's a bit risky too because you think, well, maybe they will just suck everything away from me. I mean, because yeah, you go in there, they do want your money, obviously. That's part of why they like you or whatever. But you're worried, oh well, am I just gonna melt into this village and become a animal or something? And I'm not saying they're animal people, but it was this very basic kind of pure loving, caring kind of world out there where I mean, they're not my family, but I felt like they were my family, and I felt like, wow, we are one. But if we become one, then I lose everything that I am. I mean, the podcast will just disappear. They'll drain my bank account because they're gonna be like, hey, let's have more food, let's give me more beer or whatever they want. But it felt good to share, and it felt good to not be like holding on and say, no, this is mine. And it felt good to be like, oh, I can still be happy without, you know, being a podcaster or being someone who studies or being someone who uses words. I love words, and that was gone even. So
Yeah.
being someone who I identify myself as someone who's good with words, and I like them, and that was basically gone. So I'm like, what the hell am I? But it felt really really good. But then there's also this fear of, well, I don't want to completely lose myself because I mean, then you're dead or something, basically, The bacteria and everything's gonna consume you and back into the hole. So we gotta kind of step back, but it feels really good to get closer to that melting back into everything. And this is a long little rant, but that's sort of when you're talking, that's sort of that was sort of the movie that was playing in my head.
Yeah, absolutely. You created, whether or not you knew it or not, you created an experiment for yourself. In probably wasn't necessarily the intention, but what would happen if I took podcasting away for a month? What would happen if we took away the ability to communicate with other people in English for a month, or not be able to communicate using words per se for a month? And we all get caught up into this rut literally in our brain. There's certain grooves or certain synapses that start to fire at certain times because of the routines that we have, the habits, better word to use. And so, what would happen if we start to break those habits? And doing that mindfully can open up the possibilities for us to experience ourselves and life differently. And that's what we're looking to do in creating experiments in yoga. That's a huge important part of the practice, which doesn't really get any kind of like press coverage because it's not that interesting. It's more interesting to learn in the yoga world how to stand on your hands or be able to stand on one foot while you wrap one arm around one leg and bring it behind your head or something like that. For a lot of people, that, by the way, is another trap. That whole sort of gearing towards that is a trap in and of itself. And, most people don't even know why they're doing that in the first place, but they see all these other yoga people doing it and they go, oh, I want to be a yogi, so therefore I should do that. And what real yoga practice is this practice of experimenting. What would it be like to go for a month to a remote place and just kind of turn off my electronics and just kind of sit with myself in silence and just kind of wake up early in the morning every single day, get out of bed, watch the sunrise, do something healthy. And what would that be like to do that every single day? And when we create those experiments for ourselves, we start to literally, not figuratively, literally change the routine that's in our brain that's kind of got us into a rut or into a cycle. A cycle would be a better word. And so once we start to get out of that cycle, we can see life very differently. One of the most powerful reasons why people have a powerful experience when they come to Blue Osa, a big part of it is just the fact that they got on a plane and went to the end of the world and landed on this jungle beach with nothing around them. Already, you're starting to get out of your cycle. And from that place, you see life very differently. And that's very potent. And that's the result of yoga practice. I would kind of opine a little bit, not to a large degree, but a little bit, that you came out of that experience feeling a little lighter, a little freer. There was like, oh, life doesn't have to be so burdensome. And people have that experience to varying degrees, but that's the result of practice, is that you have that inner awakening. And once you have that inner awakening, it's kind of like yogis say that we've kind of got these knots around us. There's actually a Sanskrit word called gruntis, but these knots are kind of holding us. And the tighter they become, the more restricted we feel. And as we do yoga practice and have these new awarenesses, these knots never really let go, but they start to loosen a bit. And when they start to loosen, we understand and see ourselves in, I wouldn't say that we see who we truly are, but we get more of a clear sense of the pathway to who we really are inside.
What were some of these kind of turning points, experiments, intentional or not, for you in your life?
Woo! there's, there's, there's been numerous. I write about them all in my book. My autobiography of a naked yogi is filled with those stories. I would say that the very first one happened, and it wasn't a yogic way, it was in a very different kind of setting. But when I was 14, my dad enrolled me into an all boys boarding school. And I went to an all boys boarding school in Canada. And the very kind of first activity at the school was a 7 day, might have been 7 night, 8 day hike into the Rocky Mountains. So we went into the Rocky Mountains for 8 days with nothing but a backpack, the food that we were going to eat, a ground sheet to sleep on. That's it. And at that point in my life, I was what some men would refer to as a wimp, a very kind of this wimpy personality. Another word could be delicate. I was a very delicate person at that point. And my dad had the wisdom on some level to send me to this school. And that's a whole other conversation about how and why I ended up there. But that kind of experiment really opened the floodgates for me to understand, or to begin to understand, my real potential in life, because I had somebody push me way beyond anything I thought that I could ever do. So that's one example that's a little bit more physical centered, but it's, one of the things that we just don't do enough of, I believe, in our culture, is push ourselves physically. Like, we just don't understand. And because we don't push ourselves, we don't understand what we can do. And we have barriers that exist in our mind. Another example would be one of my sweet points when I was living in New York City. And I lived in Harlem and lived on this place called Manhattan Avenue at 116th Street. And that was one of the most special points in my life, because just the way that my apartment was, I created my own sort of yoga cave. I took one of the small bedroom and I turned it into my yoga studio for myself, my practice room. And I really threw myself into my practice, forced myself to get up every morning at 5 o'clock, did my sitting practice, did my asana practice, did my pranayama practice. And by doing that every single day without fail, no matter how I was feeling, I would just go and sit, and at the very least do that sitting practice. And that started to kind of like shift so many things for me. I got my mind to a point where it was really still and quiet. And what didn't happen right away, but over time, I was able to start taking back the layers of who I thought Aaron was, and touching, to kind of use a cliche saying, I was able to start touching that light within me. And the interesting thing was, that the more I got in touch with that, a lot of like, let's say, habit patterns that I had that were not serving me just seemed to kind of like disappear and kind of melt away. And things that bothered me, like, no longer were bothering me. I didn't have my buttons pushed as much as I usually did because I just didn't care. It's like, what am I fighting for this for? What am I getting upset about this thing for? Like, I don't need to get upset because what I've got inside is, happiness.
And also in New York, you started a hot naked yoga, where I guess you were literally stripping away layers. Is it coincidence that you guys were naked? Was it just like, oh, it's fun and we're gonna be gay and naked, or is it in line with what we're talking about right now? It's like by stripping away the clothes, somehow we're also like reconnecting in a deeper way or something.
So I never had that intention when I started the class. My intention in starting the naked yoga for men in New York was it was to create a sense of brotherhood. Like I mentioned earlier, I went to an all boys boarding school, and I just, and then kind of jumped from that to I was living in Vancouver and being part of the gay scene. And I just kind of saw that feeling of brotherhood, that connection, that male connection just wasn't there. And then actually, and subsequently, I've kind of taken a look at the world in our North American culture, and the sense of brotherhood and celebration of masculinity is something that has really gone by the wayside. It's just not there. So I really saw that this opportunity of community, of brotherhood, was missing, and I wanted to fill that void, and give especially gay men another option to, circuit parties and nightclubs and that sort of thing. I was hoping to give that to them. And in the journey there, what I came to realize very quickly was, and this was sort of my own reflection of myself. When the students came in the room, I never checked them into the room, and I knew almost nothing about them other than the information they gave to me before they came, which was telling me why they wanted to do yoga, what their goals were. But beyond that, I didn't know anything about them. And so I'd look at these guys and go, "Who are you?" And I never had like a business suit to reflect on. We didn't have any we weren't wearing Lululemon clothes. There was no fancy workout gear. And that was kind of like a awakening moment for me. And when people were in the room, they didn't know anything about each other except for this person that was in their most natural state. And there's something that's just so beautiful about that. But I would say that doing that was probably the closest thing that I've ever gotten to teaching real yoga. I'm not, by the way, I'm not telling people that they are not practicing real yoga if they're not naked. So don't interpret it like that. But because we were naked and because it was a group of men, I feel like we went deeper in some of those practices than pretty much almost anything I've ever done since then. So it was a very profound awakening moment to realize you never really knew who was sitting across from you. Of course, you could judge their body, you can have some judgments, but because of the work that we were doing, which was an invitation to kind of go deeper. And when I say deeper, part of that is like listening to breath. And so we would do sometimes partner poses, and we would have, people back to back, for example, and doing some certain yoga poses. But part of the grounding exercises was just starting to tune into your own breath and then starting to tune into your partner's breathing. And that's really powerful because now you're no longer there's something when you breathe, and you might have heard about this in some of like the integrated breath work, the rebirthing, there's all of this stuff about breathing practices these days. And what starts to happen when you get into breathing, you start bypassing that part of your brain, literally, that's judging. And when you start to bypass that part of your brain that's judging, you actually become more present. And that's something that you kind of indicated that happened to you when you were in Cambodia, that you, by doing these things, you became more present. As these other superficial things dissolved, there was more attention to the present. And in the present moment is where the real magic happens.
Yeah, and along with that presence is this trust or dissipation of fear or something. Because another thing I noticed, not just in this village in Cambodia, but in the country as a whole, really, especially with the Cambodian people, they didn't seem scared of me, and I wasn't scared of them. People would look you in the eye and smile, and you'd play together with strangers, and people talk to you. Again, maybe they just want your money. I don't know, but it felt like something more. It was very, very loving. And it's not just children, it's it's everybody, you know? There was this one point, I went to go take a piss in the forest, and then afterwards I heard this kind of like this noise out further in. I walk in, and I see this like a picnic full of little kids, like 10 little kids on a blanket, and they're just showing me so much love. They start climbing on me and stuff, and I start, giving them piggyback rides around the forest and stuff. And then one little kid would pick up my water bottle and Michael, Michael, and he'd pour it in my mouth as I was, since I was thirsty, and I was just soaking wet at the end. And it's just like, what the hell is this? That's just one example of this openness and playfulness that of course children have, and I had in that moment. But it wasn't just them; it was everybody. Everyone was like just happy to be there. And there'd be moments like things that normally people would have their phones out and taking videos or pictures of, they were just watching it. Oh, but yeah, the deeper thing is like they weren't scared to look you in the eye or to smile. But then even I get to Thailand, I get to Bangkok, people are kind of starting to be scared to look at you, or they want to protect themselves in some way. And then I get deeper into civilization. I get to Hong Kong and then to Japan, and there's no eye contact, there's no smiling, there's no interaction between strangers. We're all scared of each other. And then there's also more walls. Actually, the houses start to have more walls, and there's just literally more barriers between everybody. I mean, it makes sense that, yeah, there's more resources. You got to protect them. Even going on into that forest, I had to like pretend like I didn't have as much money as I did. I had to, kind of bring $20 or whatever, because So you have to kind of create these barriers. In my case, it's like I don't know, ATM or something is a barrier. The password is and stuff. And in these cities, we got walls but yeah, people weren't scared there. But at the same time, they didn't have anything. So it was like, ooh, this is nice. I don't know, it's just such a beautiful experience to be like, oh, we're not scared of each other. We trust each other. We're open to just like be here. And I don't know who you are, and I don't even know your name. And it was just really, really nice. And now I'm back in civilization, like really, I mean, Japan. And then you're just so disconnected. But I'm getting more work done, and I'm maybe making money here, and there's all that kind of stuff going on. So I'm productive, but I'm like disconnected. So it's like, how do we have both?
Well, fear takes us away from our true self as well. And, Eckhart Tolle was here. He said fear takes us away from the present moment. And so that's actually one of the indicators, like, in the yoga tradition, there's a lot of conversation about fear for many reasons, but fear is one of the causes of suffering. And so our fear ultimately is something that we're trying to project being taken away from us. And, a good example of that is like an argument. You have an argument with somebody. And when you have an argument with somebody, for a lot of people, not everybody that's listening, but for a lot of people, they're afraid of saying, you know what, I was wrong. My position is not correct, or something to that effect. And instead of saying that, we cling to it because we've got to hold onto our position because we're afraid of letting it go. And I think, just kind of listening to you, because I've been to Cambodia several times, and in Hong Kong and in Japan, Tokyo. And I also live in Costa Rica. And one of the things that fascinates me about Costa Rican culture, and it's pretty much the same throughout Latin American culture, especially like if you go to Nicaragua or Panama, it's very similar. But in the US, there's this sense of like, we have a sense of, or in Canada, I'm actually Canadian, we have a sense of community, and community is something that we value a lot, and relationships and connections. And because we have that value, we're able to now put forth trust. So when we're in Cambodia with those boys playing around, when you were meeting people for dinner, there's this automatic, like, we trust you. And when you have trust, there's more connection, there's more love, there's more, I would actually say, a sense of being more in the present. But when you have fear, when you lead with fear, which is then of course leading to distrust, there's absolutely nothing. And there's been a lot of, it's something I've been very much fascinated by, being in this culture here and observing it through the lens of yoga. But fear is false evidence appearing real. You probably have heard that before. And and what I see with people that have their, let's say, their guard up, and then you ask them, what are you protecting? Well, I'm just protecting myself. But what are you protecting? And this is the question that people don't ask enough of. What are you protecting? And if you can really start to, again, there's a layer there, peel that layer back, dissolve that layer. What am I really protecting? And we never ask ourselves these, difficult questions. Sometimes you find a good therapist that, through charging you of 5 years of therapy, will help you finally understand that question. But you don't need to pay a therapist. Just ask yourself, what am I really protecting? Why am I holding on to this belief, this idea that people can't be trusted and that I have to protect myself? And, I don't know if you've ever heard Eckhart Tolle tell the story about when he tried to kill himself. It's a very powerful story because that was his moment of awakening. What happened was he was sitting in his chair in his study, and he said to himself, I'm going to kill myself. And he stopped in that moment and he said, I, who is the I and who is the myself? And in that moment, it was like this awakening happened within him because he realized there's like two parts of him. And so what are those parts? And the parts were, one was the ego, one was the sense of self. And so we don't ask those like very obvious questions. And so what we're really protecting, when you hear somebody say, I've got to protect myself, what they're really saying is, I have to protect this image of myself at all costs, this ego, this persona. And for the record, Michael, I do not, like, when I hear people say stuff like that, I don't stop them and coach them or workshop them. I just, observe it and move on. That's not my job. But I think for people listening, if you can start to do some of these practices that we've been talking about, it starts to have a deep impact. You start to change. One of the words I like to use is momentum. All of us are running through life. We never stop. And it's just this kind of constant go, go, go. And we're reacting to things. We never stop to ask, why am I reacting that way? But doing some of this work starts to not only then change our habit patterns and the way that we react. Well, it will start to do that, but it also is because we start to literally change our brain and the way that our brain is responding to certain stimulus and certain things in life. So doing this deep work starts to have a huge impact on our momentum. And therefore we start to create different results. And we see life differently from those different results.
Okay, so now I'm starting to understand your little near-death experience in the Himalayas a bit more now too. I was trying to connect, like, there was that year, I think you were 35 years old. Yeah, something crazy happened in the Himalayas, and then later that year, you found the place in Costa Rica, and you created Blue Osa, basically. And I'm like, these 2, events cannot be coincidences. It's sort of a whatever rock in the Himalayas is sort of a, if we believe in this butterfly effect, that was a kind of a big dragon-sized butterfly that rolled down onto you. And yeah, maybe tell the story, and then maybe also if you've sort of thought about it and found the connection between why Blue Osa kinda happened so soon after. Was it just coincidence?
Well, actually, the order is a little bit out. So it was 2007. I was leading a yoga retreat in Costa Rica, and I was on that trip. I had found which would then become Blue Osa. So I found the property, and there was like such a big moment in my life because I mean, I've done a lot of big things up until that point, but opening up a yoga retreat center in Costa Rica was definitely the biggest thing I'd ever done at that moment from a project sense. And then about 7 months, 6, 7 months later, I landed in India and was leading a group of people into the Himalayan mountains. And I was 35 at that time. I was 35 at that moment. And then that was the moment that the rock hit me. And I kind of feel that, I mean, I don't really like to think so much that the universe is, you know, throwing rocks at me, but I do think I do believe in karma to some degree. And I do think that irrespective of was there an intention behind it, was there some force driving that boulder, I do think that that experience changed me and, to use a word that my dad would say to me, toughened me up.
Yeah, that'll definitely toughen you up. That thing broke your femur and you were trapped under there. These guys carried you 20 miles.
20 yeah.
I hope you weren't naked at that time. That would
No,
have been a
I
little
wasn't
slippery
naked.
carry. It's sweaty in India.
Well, there are the I think it's called they're called the Nagus, the Nagu yogis, and they're basically naked yogis, and all they have on their bodies is ash. But, that experience, I think it just, everything I always tell people, like, all the yoga practice I did to that moment prepared me for that moment. And that moment prepared me for life on so many levels. Like, I just became more appreciative of people's efforts and more empathetic towards people who were struggling. It also taught me patience because when I was hit by the boulder, it was about 8 o'clock in the morning and I had to wait for help. Help didn't arrive until 3 in the afternoon. So I'm sitting on this glacier with a broken femur for 7 hours. And then I was starting to be taken down. And that was like one of the most painful experiences I've ever had in my life. And I had nothing to do but to breathe and to come back to the present moment. That was my practice. And then once I finally got down the mountain, it was about 12 o'clock at night. I was being carried through at midnight, and there was a ambulance waiting for me. And the ambulance took me, and I thought, okay, I'm going to be saved. And about 2 hours later, we stopped because there was a landslide and the road was closed. And so we had to stop for about 12 hours. And then we finally got going and got to the next town where I was trapped again for another 12 hours. And so it was just this constant cycle of here we are. I have nothing to do but to breathe and to be with myself. And that's it. Nothing else. And that just opened up the door for, me to kind of like, again, see life differently, understand myself differently. And so I have a lot of, even though it was very painful, I have a lot of gratitude for that experience. It also showed me like life can throw you boulders and you can still pull through.
And I bet at that time you had already thought you had let go of, a lot of yourself. You had very few possessions. You were moving around, so you weren't really even holding onto a place. You're still holding on to something, but I guess that kind of probably also started to melt away and be released from your identity and world and life. Now you're in Costa Rica. Another thing about Costa Rica is it's full of nature and biodiversity, and this connection between humans and non-human species, and it's also something I noticed. I keep bringing it back to Cambodia. Is not only were people not scared of each other, they weren't scared of nature. They were wearing no shoes. They weren't scared of bacteria or germs. They would drink out of the same bowl or whatever. There wasn't this fear of connecting with all of it. And of course, there's dangers involved in that. We there's reasons why we are scared of nature. But when we're not scared of nature, when we trust it, it's a beautiful experience. I mean, to kind of put this all together, I mean, what's one of our favorite experiences? It's sex. There were all the layers are gone. Now we're actually both naked and it's all gone, and we're making out and sharing all the bacterias, having a party, and but we're not scared. It's the most beautiful experience, but I think maybe it's because finally all the layers are gone and we're not scared for a moment. But yeah, even out there in nature, you don't need to be barefoot and running around naked and, licking the dirt and all that. But even just walking, you like to hike and swim and walk around and stuff. Even just sort of touching that border, kind of starting to kind of melt yourself into it, feels really nice. But I think the more we can stop to even fear the non-human world, then things get even more beautiful. And that's another kind of gateway into this. Maybe doing it together with people will be even better. But it feels nice to not. I mean, nature's not a scary thing, but we seem to be scared of it. And then again, once you get deeper into civilization, like I get, from Bangkok to Hong Kong to Japan, I start to notice that people are even more protective of their health. Yeah, but I mean, when you're not so scared of losing what you have, you're not clinging to overprotecting your health and cleanliness and safety and appearance and all of those things so much, then you feel better. But it's a kind of dance you play, and I mean, you don't want to get all dirty and sick and ugly, but the opposite extreme is a bit even sadder. A lot of us experienced this during COVID, and some people are doing this still in a lot of modern societies, like in Japan and Singapore, and I guess I don't know, certain parts of Europe or wherever people have something that they don't want to lose. But it's nice to not be scared of and to stay connected to nature. So it's kind of no coincidence again that you're probably in Costa Rica, not in New York at this point.
Absolutely. Being close to nature, it's one of the reasons why I love Costa Rica so much. There's just so much nature. At Blue Osa, sometimes we experience like 4 species of monkeys around our property. And that's just a really special thing. We have sloths that hang out on our property, toucans, scarlet macaws, several hundreds of species of birds. And so it's just, there's so much nature. And then, of course, we have the rain because we are in a rainforest. And rain brings life, and it invigorates and inspires, and it brings forth these incandescent or radiant colors. And so it's just like you go to Costa Rica on the beach, and it's just like somebody turns the saturation level up of your life.
No, I mean, even last night, it started to rain, and I was just walking through the rain, and I was getting wet, and I didn't have an umbrella, and you think that's a terrible experience, and I think we've all experienced this, and we as children we embraced it, but just like getting wet, letting the rain touch you, putting your feet on the ground, walking on the grass or walking on the dirt, it feels good. I think we all secretly like it, whether we admit it or not, and connecting with even what we see as the uncomfortable nature.
I encourage people, when you have the opportunity, get raw and naked in nature. I have a whole blog post on that. And it is very healing if you have the opportunity to do it with somebody else. You don't have to be in a relationship with that person. I think that one of the things that that we've lost is like, you can look back and you see like these kind of old periodic going back like 100, 200 years ago, where a group of men got together, not got together like for this reason, but they were doing whatever they were doing. They came across a lake and all of them would strip their clothes off and jump into the lake or jump into the water. And or you would see like a group of women doing that. And I think that's something that we've really lost is that ability to connect. And there's something that's so healing and profound about that experience. And everything has become so sanitized, overly sanitized. And that, there's a lot of, I think, reasons for that. But the more that you can do that, one of my favorite things to do is grab a friend and I do this one hike. It's actually very close to me. And I know this area that nobody ever goes to. Like done that hike probably 30 times over the years and I've never seen one person. And one of my favorite things to do is there's one little, it's not a pasture, it's like a pasture on the side of a mountain. Take off my clothes, put something down, sit on it, and just meditate. And there's just something that's very revealing, grounding, homecoming about that experience.
Yeah, now that you mention that, one thing I've always kind of regretted is it was a very short, like 5-minute experience that I sat on the sidelines for. I was like, I don't know about this one. I was in Boy Scouts and we were hiking Mount Whitney. We took the long route, so it's like a 5-day version of it. You can do the shortcut version where you just drive up to the top, basically. But we were hiking. Beside the point. At the end of it all, we found this lake. There's a bunch of lakes out there too, and then I think everybody except for me, they all just ripped their clothes off and jumped in the lake. But I was like, oh my God, that's gay or that's cold or I don't know. I had reasons, but I was like, I didn't do it, but everyone else did. And I thought, wow, what a beautiful memory that could have been.
Yes. And again, you come back to that layer. Why? What were you afraid of? For me, it probably would have been the cold water, and I'm fine with owning that. But, if it's like, oh, I have shame about myself, again, what is that shame about? What is that embarrassment about? And who's really embarrassed? And again, it's just peeling back the layers. We put ourselves in these situations to go, what is it that I'm really protecting? And then once you have that answer, you can either choose to let it go or hold on to it.
We're talking about yoga as a way to remove these layers or these boundaries between us and everything, our larger self, I guess. How does asana, these postures, these what we think of as yoga? I mean, when you say the word yoga, people think about you're doing these exercises, these bodily movements. How does that help with this specifically?
So there's so many ways to answer that. One of them is that in the yoga scriptures, it clearly states the purpose of asana. And the purpose of asana is, I'll give you one of the purposes, is to help us become more stable. The opposite of instability, and another thing that's important to understand is the instability is up here. It's in our mind. It's in our head. And the opposite of stability is instability. And when we're unstable in our mind, it's a gateway to confusion. And a confused mind will never live a happy or fulfilled life. Now, you may be a successful person. That doesn't mean that you're fulfilled and happy. And by success, I mean like you make a lot of money or, something like that. Or maybe you get to be America's top model or something like that. But it doesn't necessarily mean you're fulfilled or happy. So, what we look towards in yoga is getting stable. And we want to get the mind to become more stable. One of the descriptions of the mind in the scriptures is that the mind is like the ocean or a lake. And an ocean that's turbulent. There's a lot of waves in the mind. You have a thought about this, you have a thought about that. I'm too fat, I'm too skinny, I don't eat well enough, I should become more vegetarian. My partner, I should be more loving to them, I should be more chastising to them. There's all of, I sometimes call it the committee up here. And we have a committee that's constantly bombarding us and it creates chaos. I mean, one of the number one things that you constantly hear about is we're in a mental health crisis, which, by the way, is another instability of conversation, which we could talk about another time. But I think you and I could objectively agree that a lot of people are suffering right now from confusion. They don't know what they believe, they don't know who they are. And because of that, there's a lot of chaos in a lot of people's lives. I mean, if I pick up the phone and call one of my, especially, let's say, even Canadian friends, American or Canadian friends, they'll be like, things are not going in a good direction. There's a lot of chaos right now. I just don't know which end is up. That is a sign of a confused mind. What yoga says, let's bring stability to it. And so when we practice posture correctly, when we practice asana, the yoga poses, what we're endeavoring to do is through our body bring a sense of stability. And so that's done through breathing. It's done through practicing postures in an intelligent way. You could say intelligent movement. I translate intelligent as like slow and deliberate and intentional. So that's one of the ways that I translate intelligent. And when we start to do that, there's something that's very profound that starts to happen in the mind. And the mind starts to shift. I'm going to use that word again, Michael. Momentum. Our brain starts to literally shift its momentum from, using that wave analogy, going like this, like up and down, up and down, up and down, to becoming more even keeled. And in that even keelness, we start to become more present. We become more in the present. We're no longer thinking about what friend is involved with the wrong political party. What am I going to be eating for dinner tonight so I can lose 20 pounds by tomorrow? All of these thoughts start to dissipate because our mind becomes quiet. It becomes more, using that word again, steady and stable. So stability is the core of what we would call yoga practice. We want to get stable. So that's one of the reasons why we practice asana. But I'll give you one more reason is so many of us are holding our body in a certain way. And we just don't have awareness of how we move through space, what we're doing with it. And the way that we hold ourselves is a habit pattern. And a habit pattern starts to create our actions, and our actions start to form our life and personality. As we start to shift and change the way that we hold ourselves. So let's just kind of use like a very simplistic but very profound example. We're sitting at a desk all day, hunched over. Come into yoga class, we start to practice back bends. We start to hold our spine in a more erect position. When you're kind of hunched over, you're going to have a certain attitude about life. It will just start to happen. You look at people with back pain, they're hunched over, they're closing in. Their personality is also hunched over and closing in. And so that affects us as we start to do these postures and start to explore new ways of holding ourselves. It has this kind of chain reaction in changing the way that we are, but also how we hold ourselves. And we get to hold ourselves differently. And if we do that, of course, in a stable way, then that in and of itself starts to have a profound impact on our mind. So those are just a couple of reasons. There's a lot more reasons, but those are just a couple.
No, that's really useful for me too, because we hear about there's these 8 limbs of yoga. There's meditation, and there's sensory withdrawal, and there's the breath, and all these things. And yeah, maybe stability is a nice little word that kind of threads all of this together. These are different gateways into stability.
Yeah. A lot of people, beware, that talk about the 8 limbs have very little knowledge about what they're talking about. This is a big problem in the yoga world I seek to remedy, is that our understanding of just what asana is. If you asked 100 yoga teachers what asana is, none of them would have given you the same answer that I just gave you, which is pulling scriptural reference. And what I would just say to anybody listening to this podcast, we use asana as a way to start to shift our momentum in our brain, in our mind, and get it stable. And when you leave a yoga practice, when you leave a yoga class, you should feel just really so stable and clear. And in that place, that's when you get answers to life's biggest questions. So that's the marking of a successful yoga practice.
Another big piece of what you do is it's another book you wrote, you Stop Stretching. How does stretching and muscle activation connect with all of this?
Well, the short answer, and I'll actually answer this two ways. So the book, as you said, is called Stop Stretching, and that's kind of a loaded statement. But one of the intentions of calling it Stop Stretching was because there's this obsession in the yoga world that yoga equals stretching. Even if you ask a lot of yoga teachers, they'll say that. Oh, it's about stretching and being present as you're stretching. And it's like there's nowhere in any yoga scripture that mentions the word stretching. It just doesn't happen. And so part of this is about reclaiming yoga's true intention. So what is the number one practice? I was just telling you what it was, is get stable. Do things that make you or empower you or help you, whatever word you want to use, to get stable. Because the opposite of stability is instability, and instability is a confused mind. And there's so many confused minds. So where does a yama fit into this? A yama is about getting stable. Ultimately, it's a way to practice yoga asana that's going to leave you ultimately more stable and then ultimately more at peace with yourself. And so we want to do things that are, again, intelligent, and intelligent means slow, intentional, deliberate.
And some people listening they could be confused as I am now too between well, no, not I mean, I'm not confused in general, but this is one point where we're talking
Sure,
about
sure, sure.
stability is the goal, but then also this letting go and stripping away layers is the goal. So in a way, it seems like when we're kind of melting into it all and letting go, we're kind of becoming, I mean, we're getting rid of our stability, but now we want to be stable. So what's the connection between stability and letting go and stripping away layers?
Well, I would argue that within your layers, you're more unstable. You're never going to get rid of those layers if you're not stable, or dissolve those layers. That's a better word to use, or penetrate them to dissolve them. But, there's kind of three thoughts. First thought, just do the asana, let the yoga happen. Second thought, deal with your mind and then get into asana. And the third thought is what I have, is kind of do a combination of both. Do some asana to get you to a quiet place and then start to do the work from that quiet place. And it's so important that we invest time every single day to find those moments of quietness. One of the things that we do at Blue Osa is to practice morning silence. And it's the biggest gift that we can give people. Some of our guests come and they don't think it is right away. But that is the biggest gift that we can give to people, is giving them a moment in the day where there's no noise and there's just stillness. And in that place, we can start to see what we're holding on to and make a decision about if we want to let it go. And you cannot get still without stability. It's pretty impossible. Stability leads to that stillness. And so we need to get to work. There's some work that needs to be done on body to get people to that place of stillness.
Okay, the confusion's gone now. That makes complete sense. When we are wearing these layers and masks and holding on, there's this appearance of stability. We're trying to look stable, but then the reality is we're unstable, but it's just putting on appearances of, oh, look, I'm stable. Look, I'm stable. So that's why I was confused, because these people look stable, but it's all about the appearance of being stable. But then, and in reality, by letting go and stripping things away, that's when you, I guess, gain the real stability or confidence or, footing or whatever. So then it makes sense. I think it's because people are putting on that appearance and that act, and that's sort of part of the goal, I think, of wearing these layers and things is to put on the appearance of stability. I guess I got kind of bamboozled or tricked by the little dance that we all put on. So okay, yeah, that makes sense. And then you were saying how stillness. Get more into the stillness, and then we'll kind of close this off.
Well, the stillness is the place where the magic happens. Now, for some people who kind of like are trying to understand that, so in our brain, we have different brain waves. One of those brain waves, as you know, is the alpha brain wave. Your brain goes into alpha rhythms, theta, beta, and delta. And so each of these different rhythms. But one of the magic places from a yogic perspective is getting our brain into that alpha rhythm. And that's the place of complete stillness, where our mind, and how we do that in yoga is we focus our mind on one thing, one point. One of my teachers gave this really good example. He was talking about these kind of like Olympic Games. I think the Olympic Games were going on at that time. And there was a sharpshooter. He was talking about these sharpshooters, and some of them run, they go from target to target or something, and then they stop and they have to shoot a target. And as they're kind of like lining it up, and they're looking down that target, if you were able to like look at what their brainwave was, it would be at an alpha brainwave. They have nothing else in their mind at that moment except the one point that they're focused on. And then that's the kind of like level of stillness that we're looking to achieve. And so the way that we do that, of course, is in yoga practice. We deal with the instability of the body. Then we start to get to work on our mind, and we do that through a sitting practice. And what we're looking to do is get our brain, our mind, to that one point so there's just nothing else. And the other word for it, again, is just present moment. When we're in the present moment, we're actually in that alpha brainwave. If we're completely in the present moment, completely saturated, not, oh, I'm in the present moment, but that we're actually in that place. And so that's when we're in the present, our brain or mind is still. And there's a beautiful passage from Psalms. I love to pull scriptures out and quote them, but one of my favorite ones is "Be still and know that I am God." And there's so much to unpack in that statement. God is who you are inherently. And the divine, or the essence of who you are, whatever you want to call it, consciousness, it exists within you. And the only way to know that is to be still. So a lot of people come to my yoga teacher trainings. I have a whole kind of talk I do on this, and it's available on the YouTube, where I talk about the subject of it is faith. But the essence of it is I see so many people coming to yoga retreats, coming to Luosa, especially my teacher trainings, with questions about their life, and there's this heaviness about them, and they want to understand their purpose. And so many of us are busy clinging or running after, what is my purpose? What is my purpose? What is my purpose? And what yoga says is just get still. And you think, but I have to chase after something. I have to try and get something. I have to understand this. I need to dissect it and pull it apart. And yoga says, no, just get still, be still. And what I constantly see is within a very short amount of time, in that stillness, it creates the space for the answers just to drop in. And that's where the real magic happens.
Okay, so now you're really helping me make sense of my little Cambodia experience. It wasn't just Cambodia, it was me. Prior to Cambodia, I was in Vietnam. I blasted through Vietnam in like 2 weeks, never spending more than like 2 days in one city. It's like bum, 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 bum. And I wasn't happy. I don't even remember a lot of it. It was just like, wow, what the hell was that? And then suddenly I wasn't in complete stillness. Obviously, I was traveling. But then you reach a point in a city when you travel after a few days or whatever, where you feel like you've seen it all, you're done. But then I would get to that point and then I would just stay for a week or 10 days or 12 days or whatever in a single city. And then that's when things opened up. And that's when I guess I became more present and connected. And then at the very end of this, it ended in this little village experience. But maybe that would have never happened. It couldn't have happened because I would have just left, Siem Reap or whatever and gone on to Bangkok or whatever. But I think it was me not in complete stillness, but at least staying put in one place. And the same thing happens when you stay put in one relationship or one conversation like this, then the deeper you go and the more you stay, it gets better and better. Like, I'm not bringing this back to podcasting just now too, but like, imagine a 15-minute interview versus some people do these 4-hour interviews. There you're really staying put. And, again, it's not stillness. You're not meditating, but there's a sort of element of stillness there that I think lets you open up and be present and feel connected. And, so it wasn't just Cambodia. It was also me. Even then it wasn't me, something happened in me. Maybe I got so tired of the moving around and chasing and novelty or whatever that I was like, I'm tired. So maybe naturally our bodies kind of just force us into stillness eventually. But I'm so lucky that somehow I was able to stay put and see what was around me.
Absolutely. I mean, good analogy. Sitting with something, sitting with a conversation, sitting with a relationship, sitting in stillness, sitting with discomfort. And I don't mean like you need to lie on a bed of nails discomfort, but just your own inner discomfort. Like you just saw a Facebook post that you didn't like because somebody was commenting on the political figure that you liked, and leaving a negative remark about them. Sitting with that discomfort instead of reacting is one of the most potent things that we can do. There's all of this kind of thing out there, like if you get into an argument, you just should talk it out and just tell the person how you feel, because that's your right as a human being, is to express yourself. And yeah, okay, sure, if you want to buy into that. But yoga says, instead of like just expelling all of that energy, practice sitting with it and holding on to it. And that will improve your capacity to be able to handle the bigger things in life eventually. And they always say God won't give you more than you can handle. If you don't train yourself to handle more, then you're never ever going to be given more to handle.
If people want to connect with you, I know you have a website, yogiaaron.com. You've got books, Autobiography of a Naked Yogi, Stop Stretching. You had a little podcast series. I think it's also called Stop Stretching. Anything else you want to throw out there?
No, I would just say if people are wanting to know more, contact me on Instagram or through my website. And that's a great place to just get the free pain-free series. So if people are experiencing pain, aka instability in their body, then that is a great place to start. I also have a free affirmation series. It's a 28-day series on how to manifest and live your life purpose. So there's a lot there on yogiaaron.com, and get plugged in if you want to go out to manifest and live your life purpose.
Thank you again, Aaron. See you in Costa Rica.
Thanks, Michael.